Hey everyone, it's Tim from timgagnon.com, your place for online painting lessons. Today I'm creating another tips and tricks video for you, and what we're going to focus in on is painting snow on trees in an oil painting. So I'm working on this painting here, kind of a bigger painting, and almost finished, but I wanted to create kind of this progression to create kind of like this video to teach you how I paint snow on trees. So I kind of have this progression here already. I'm going to talk about a little bit here, and each step of the process in creating snowy trees. So after a heavy snowstorm here in Maine, we have a lot of pine trees and fir trees that get covered in kind of this wet, heavy snow, and it brings all the branches down and creates these kind of magical looking trees. It's really pretty, especially on like a sunrise or a sunset. All the snows are nice and pink. So I'm just going to talk about the progression here. So I've got a tree with no snow. This is kind of the first step in putting in the snow. The next step here, and then the final step. Even though I'm going to add a little bit more to these a little bit later on, I think I'll make the snow a little bit more yellowish. Not for the reason that you might think, but because the sky itself has a little bit of yellow in it. Don't eat the yellow snow. So here is how I approach it. When I initially create the shape of the tree, I want to create the overall tree shape drooping down. So even though I put some detail into the branches here, it's not vitally important because a lot of it gets covered up in snow. What you have to think of is the tree itself is not always covered in snow everywhere, so some details should be there. So don't be afraid to cover up some of the details as you go and put snow on there. But to create the details first, you know, it's kind of nice because then when you go to put the snow on there, you can see, like on this tree here, I have some of these branches kind of sticking out that have details on them. So you do want to do that a little bit to an extent. So first step, create the tree. Next step, while the tree's relatively still wet, you use some of the colors that you have in the sky and the snow, and you create these snow clumps on the tree, which I'm going to show you here in just a minute. Next step is to let that dry a little bit, and then you start adding in some more highlights, a little bit lighter snow on the highlight side. And you can see on this it's left to right, all the shadows are cast to the right, so the lighter snow will be over on the left hand side. As you build it up, you can see over here, you get quite a bit brighter, and you can kind of start to texture the snow, which means like putting the paint on thicker, so it kind of actually bumps out from the painting. That makes it look a little bit more realistic. So that's the process in creating the snow. Now what I'm going to do is show you how I apply that first layer of snow, and then the second layer, and then you can kind of see the finished part down here at the end. Okay, so the first step here is I want this tree to be a little bit wet, so when I add the snow on to the tree, it mixes in a little bit and it alters the color of the snow to match up with the tree. Hopefully that makes sense. What I want to do is I'm just going to take, I'm using a small round brush for this, and I want to take a little bit of the sky color and the tree color and combine that. So the first thing here, take a little bit of my medium. I'm using a 50-50 mix, linseed oil and odorless mineral spirits. And I'm going to take some of my white, and for my sky I used alizarin crimson, so I'm going to make that kind of like a pink color. And then I had some of my ultramarine blue in my tree, so you can see here getting a nice purple color to start with. So using this color and allowing the tree itself to kind of mix in. It's almost dry, it's just a little bit wet. And what I want to do is just kind of pick out a branch, and I'm going to start curving as I come down. Okay, so a nice kind of curved shape, and you can kind of soften the edge. You don't need it to be a sharp edge. On the edges of the snow, as it kind of goes up and recedes under branches or comes away from the light source, we want to go a little bit more blue in the mix. So I'll have a bluish color down here. And so as it comes up here, maybe up underneath some branches, and then along the edge here, going a little bit more blue. So I just kind of make one mound at a time, and then I'll build off it. So I'll go back to that original color, and maybe over here, the snow kind of comes out into the middle of the tree. Maybe there's a mound of snow kind of trailing all the way up. And then each time I'll go back to that more bluish so I can recede, have the snow recede up into the shadows a little bit, and then along the edges. So this is the initial layer, the initial color that I'm going to work with. As I work my way to the right, I'm going to stick with this same kind of plane right here. I'm going to go more blue for my snow. So over here, let's say the snow starts to come down. Maybe it's a new mound of snow. Still going to curve it and go along. I want to go just slightly above a branch. Over here, I'll go even more blue. Maybe a little bit more alizarin too. So getting almost like a dark purple over here. Could do just a little bit, maybe right there. But we're just, so it's getting a little bit more blue as it goes around on the side of the tree. So since I've got that blue going, maybe there's a mound of snow on the branches here. And it doesn't have to be everywhere. When you work in the middle of the tree, you kind of just pick a spot and just bring out a little mound of snow. And the shapes, you know, you just kind of want it to be rounded, long shapes. But you want to have a lot of variety in those shapes because you don't want them all to look the same. You want it to look really natural. So sometimes just little dabs. Okay, so that's the initial phase as you kind of block in some of those darker colors to start with. And I could have gone a little bit darker over here on the side. And if that's the case, if it's you end up going a little bit too light, you can just darken your paint a little bit more with ultramarine blue and alizarin. And you can go right over some of this stuff and darken it up, especially along the edges. Because what we're going to do is continue to add highlights in, so that way we have some depth within the snow. Even maybe right along this one. Go a little bit darker purple as it works its way up under the branches. All right, so that's step one, which is carried over here. You can see on this one a little bit more pinks here and there. That's always an option too. So you can go a little bit more pink in some areas. Maybe it reflects the snow. Again, you just want a lot of variety. And what we're trying to do is create those mounded shapes. All right, so that's phase one. I'm going to show you phase two of highlighting. And then over here, of course, is the more finished tree. So as we work over here, I still want to stick within those same colors, but now I want to go much more white. And I have a little bit less medium. What I want to do is kind of pick out spots where I think the sunlight is coming and just hitting bits of the snow. So basically we're just trying to highlight the snow as it's coming across here. And you can see I've had some yellow highlights here in the snow a little bit. And you can start incorporating some of that yellow ochre in the snow as well to kind of start getting that highlight look And we're not hitting every spot, especially as we go through the middle portion, just hitting spots where we think maybe the snow is sticking out far enough, because the branches are coming out towards us, that we're just hitting spots where we feel like the light would be hitting. And then we want to do the same thing down at the base of the tree and just do some of these long, I'm going to incorporate a little bit more yellow here, but some of these longer brush strokes, thick paint. I always feel like thick paint works better for snow. So we're exaggerating the highlight coming up. So where the snow kind of goes into the previous color, we don't want the color to just stop. So we want to go into maybe a little bit more purple and extend the highlight and kind of fade it into this color, almost like a gradient. So the two big keys here is going lighter and then taking any of those sharp edges and forming a gradient into the shadow. Sometimes that means just feathering out the edge. Sometimes it's adding in more highlights. So if we wanted the snow to kind of look like it's mounded back up into this portion of the tree, you add the highlight, you grab a color that's similar to the color that's already on here, and kind of push the snow back to soften the edges. All right, so that's the process. We start out with these shapes, we add in some of the highlights, and then with the highlights we soften the edges, going back into the shadows. And you can play around with those colors too. Sometimes a little bit more pinkish, sometimes a little bit more blue. On the back side of the tree, I really like to add in these bluish hues, especially along the edges of some of the mounds of snow. And that will help kind of look like it's even more in shadow. So lots of little things you can do here to create this heavy snow covered tree. Last but not least, you just work those highlights up until you get something like this. Once you're here at this point, you can go into some of that blue like I was doing over on that tree over there and incorporate some more shadows along edges just to finish everything off. Biggest thing I look for here when I get to this point is a wide range of hues and values, and I try to make it so there's not too many sharp edges. So I'll go along. If I see a sharp edge, I'll just kind of soften it with some of my shadow color to make it look more three-dimensional. That way it looks like the snow is more mounded. So that's kind of the finishing touch. And then last but not least, I always kind of check the snow down here and try to incorporate as many colors and values in that as well. Okay, to recap, again, the first thing I do using dark color based around the other colors I've used within the painting, I create a droopy looking pine tree. First step with the snow is to add mounds of snow, almost like in an abstract fashion. Big keys there is just a lot of rounded edges and soft edges as well. Once I have that, I let it dry a little bit. I begin adding in highlights with thicker paint in just certain spots to create the sense of light coming across, and I build that up over time into a more highlighted tree. Couple big keys there. Again, blue edges on the back side of the tree really help create more of a rounded look and just a little bit more depth within the tree, because these trees are pretty much a silhouette based on the time of day. There's not a whole lot of detail and depth within the tree, so you're making the depth with the snow. I hope you enjoyed the tips and tricks video today. If you have any questions, you can email me at tim@timgagnon.com. Make sure you check out my website at www.timgagnon.com for all your online painting lesson needs. I have lots of online lessons from oils to acrylics, lots of subject matter. And make sure you check out my workshop schedule. I'll be heading out this year across the country teaching in-person workshops. Make sure you subscribe to the channel Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon.